plunged into crisis. The warning signs were there 10 years earlier. Everyone saw them.
America is addicted to oil, which is often imported from unstable parts of the world.
With demand for oil soaring in booming China and India, Saudi Arabia has threatened to turn off the taps to the west, sparking an oil shock.
We haven't moved.
The price has.
I think most people don't accept what's going to hit us. Most people don't accept that this is a real possibility, and they don't accept the consequences of it.
The age of oil is coming to an end. We can't take anything for granted anymore.
When you talk to Americans, it nearly feels like the average person on the street thinks it's their God-given right to fill up with petrol.
So now the race is on to the ends of the earth in a desperate search for black gold.
They think this is the next giant oil field.
No, they don't. They think this is the last giant oil field.
These are desperate men.
Oil rigs are full of desperate men.
This well is costing us $36 million.
Which is why I want to hit the target.
But what if the oil isn't out there anymore? What then?
Tonight's top story, the oil crisis deepens as Saudi Arabia says the West shouldn't take its oil for granted. Petrol station queues look set to stay as the Saudi oil minister today refused to increase oil exports to Europe and the United States.
It's not our job to service the SUVs of America, he said at a meeting of OPEC ministers in Vienna.
When do we need to go?
Now. What took you so long, Nick? Calculating the wave power you generated when you washed your feet?
I felt dirty, Jess.
Didn't look it.
The news has sent crude prices up by a further $5 to $95 a barrel.
On the current course of the way we're developing our society in the United States and Europe and the rest of the world, we have an addiction for oil that can't stop.
Analysts predict prices of over $100 a barrel in the next week, the highest oil price in history.
And the minute we have an unpleasant supply disruption, we're going to have a crisis.
A future oil shock, like the one from Saudi Arabia, will produce very, very difficult policy dilemmas for governments. What it means to the world is that consuming countries throughout the world will be unable to get the oil they need to service their economies.
If it's a severe oil shock, you might actually see panic buying happening straight away. People filling up their cars because they're worried that oil within a few weeks would actually run out at petrol stations.
What's happening?
The road's gone all wavy.
What hasn't? Nick, pull over.
The power's gone.
Why has it? It's 7:20.
We've run out of petrol.
We're supposed to be there in 10 minutes.
We'll ring Mona and tell her we'll be late.
It's a surprise. I can't ring and tell her we're going to be late for a party she knows nothing about.
It'll be another surprise. I'm only us being late.
You were supposed to get some fuel.
I know.
So, why didn't you?
Because every garage I passed yesterday had queues down the street and I was late.
Where's the petrol? Can't.
Jess!
Jess, I thought there was enough petrol for tonight.
What if we'd run out this afternoon when I was on my own?
I didn't know you were going anywhere.
I had an appointment at the oil company.
You didn't say?
Alan rang. The U.S. federal government has finally given them a license to drill a wildcat oil well in Alaska. The Arctic Wildlife Refuge. They've studied all the data and they're going to use my prospect.
What about us?
I've studied the evolution of the basin. It's my field work. It's my well.
And no one else has a say?
We agreed that I would give up work. We agreed that I would go through IVF treatment after IVF treatment, and I've done it for a year and a half. And where has it got us?
You don't have to go to Alaska.
Just for a few months. I can't carry on not working, not being pregnant, not living my life. This isn't where I want to be, Nick.
The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, or ANWR as it's often called, is for some people a touchstone for the search for new oil. It's really an untouched area of natural beauty in a very remote corner of Alaska. This is a classic case where the desire for environmental preservation and the search for oil come into conflict.
So actually allowing it to be opened up and be drilled is in effect admitting that America's got a serious problem and wants to lower its dependence on foreign oil by any means whatsoever.
Maybe you ate them.
Where are the chips, Jamie?
Thought you were on a diet.
Did you hide the chips?
John, it's the oil man.
Right.
In an oil shock, our lives will change. Typically what happens when the oil price goes up rapidly is that, especially coming up to a high demand period such as the winter, many areas like Minneapolis have to survive off heating oil, and the heating oil gets priced off the oil price. So if the oil price is doubling, then your heating oil for that winter is doubling. And this is typically a huge shock for people because they've been used to a winter bill which is maybe a few $100s, and then it effectively goes up to $1,000 per month.
Got a new car, huh?
Yep.
Fill it up yesterday?
You bet I did.
$3.50 at the station on Cleveland Road this morning.
Person wants to drive his car, he'll find a way.
You'd be wishing you bought a bicycle.
How much is this gonna cost me?
400-gallon tank? 1,300, 1,400.
It cost me $1,000 last spring.
They should have called us in early fall. It's cheaper then. Snow at the end of the week.
They're gonna have us building our own coffins next.
Yeah, I reckon we already are. Just don't expect the Saudis to put gas in the hearse. That's it.
I think people today are only starting to really accept the fact that their basic lives, in terms of their ability to get around, their ability to heat their homes, the fact that they have a job, depend on stable geopolitics in major oil producers. There's only one global oil market, and we all live in it. In 2016, oil companies are going to be under tremendous pressure to continue to find enough oil to replace the oil they're taking out of the ground each day. In order to be sustainable, an oil company needs to every day find at least as much oil as it produces. And that's becoming harder and harder as more and more major areas become depleted.
Thanks, Jess.
This is where we're drilling, Area 1002, the Marsh Creek anticline of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's been a known oil and gas province for a long time, but it's also environmentally sensitive. There's been heavy opposition to drilling,
which has been overcome by the U.S. government.
So this is the first well in the area. It's a wildcat well. Our main objective is to drill down to a depth of 2,500 meters in 25 days, which the ops guys tell me is doable.
Prospecting for oil is like fishing in a pond. Initially, it's easy to catch the fish, but over time, as you're going after the fish that are deeper down, you have to be more and more patient because there are fewer fish and they're lying in the deeper water and they're harder to get at. So effectively, when you look into the oil industry, that means going to the ends of the earth to try and find the remaining barrels.
This region. This is a sample reservoir rock at the surface from my fieldwork.
Alan! Wolves! Alan!
Next, the Cretaceous Canning Formation. The upper shales of these form the seal holding the oil in the lower sands of the target reservoir. We expect the reservoir sand section to be more than 200 meters thick.
The target that big, you hardly need a drilling program.
Holding a potential 4 billion barrels of oil.
You could pick a spot with your eyes shut.
Alan!
Hey! Run! Run!
So if you'd like to put your 3D specs on, we'll take a closer look at the structure of the seismic data to view the prospect. So our main target is in this thrust zone here. As you can see, it's part of a complicated zone with several faults, which we must avoid. Because of the fault zones, our target tolerance is very small. It's 50 meters.
How many cores are in the program?
Well, I'd like to core the entire reservoir, but given my budget, I'm limited to 4.
We've got to hit a 50-meter spot.
50, yes.
Your call.
ANWR might produce in a positive scenario 1.5 million barrels a day. That's about 2% of the overall oil market. And it's less than our increase in demand over the next 5 years. ANWR's not going to solve the problem. It's one small part, potentially, of the solution, but a part that comes at great environmental cost.
Thank God you're here.
You're not scared, are you?
Of what? The idiot with the
pencil? They think this is the next giant oil field.
No, they don't. They think this is the last giant oil field.
In the last untouched corner of America. These are desperate men.
Oil rigs are full of desperate men.
So what do you reckon?
You heard?
4 billion barrels?
At least. I can't believe we're finally going back.
And this time with 40 men and a $36 million budget.
There's no easy oil left in the world. Geologists are basically scouring the parts of the planet that nobody really goes to in search for the last remaining sizable oil reserves. That's why places like the Arctic, Alaska, the very deep water in the oceans are typically areas geologists will currently look.
So glad you're sitting this well for me.
Well, we're a good team.
I'm relying on you to keep the wolves at bay.
Listen, if the Inuits are happy and we got round the environmentalists, then I'm sure the wolves will just roll over.
When you speak to the oil companies, they do try to reassure you that there's a lot of oil out there. But the truth of it is, actually, people misrepresent their reserves all the time for political reasons or commercial reasons. So even when people say we think there's lots of oil out there, we don't actually know that they're telling the truth.
As the price of oil stays high or even continues to rise, the first event would be natural gas prices would start to go up and electricity prices would start to go up. So you might start to see the infrastructure networks start to break down, and eventually you would get to the point where only very localized products could be guaranteed to be fresh and in the supermarket on a frequent basis.
Hey, John.
$5.49 for a melon. Who pays $5.49 for a melon?
When our daughter visits, she's gonna have all her favorite things.
She's only gonna be here for 2 hours.
It's not all for Jessica.
What are you gonna do? Liquidize it and feed it to her intravenously?
Intravenously. I'm stocking up.
Powdered milk. I am not gonna drink powdered milk.
There is no fresh milk.
You try to put that in my coffee, I'm not drinking it.
You won't know the difference.
One of the consequences of energy costs going up is that business will start slowing down. You'd start seeing people making less profits. You'd start seeing lower levels of economic activity. And whether it's a recession, whether it's a depression, depends really on how sharp the oil price increase is, and also on how the government responds to it.
K News Radio AM 970 weather. Bundle up tonight, it's gonna be cold. Overnight low 21. Coming up in news briefing, there's no end in sight to surging gas prices. In the last 8 weeks, oil has risen over 50% on global markets, and nobody's predicting when the run is gonna slow down. In business, China signs a massive oil for trade deal with Saudi Arabia.
I thought you should hear this from the horse's mouth. I'm gonna have to stand down half the fleet. More than half the fleet.
Well, what about the contracts?
We're just keeping the big one with the superstore.
So I'm still driving?
You're all right, John.
That's only 4 trucks.
I'm standing down the other 6. Letting the contracts go.
Laying the drivers off?
There's no other answer. Is there?
Britain could see a return to 1973 as the government considers ways to conserve fuel stocks. It's thought some form of rationing and speed restrictions are being considered.
In 1973, Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Yamani in particular, played a crucial role in redefining the oil system.
During 1973 and 1974, with the Yom Kippur War, OPEC, or the leading Middle Eastern states, decided at that time with Sheikh Yamani to restrict the exports of oil to the countries that were behind Israel in the war. That led to oil supply to the West slowing dramatically and queues at petrol stations.
I think America has 2 columns for their policy in the Middle East: Israel and oil. And the 2 were all right until 73. That's the first time when there was a clash between the 2. And from then, they started a new policy. And then they found that there should be other sources. Russia is not the answer. The answer was Iraq.
How am I going to keep warm with no one to hold on to?
Get a parka like mine.
You might look a bit silly around the flight in one of those.
Turn the stat up.
It's the answer to everything, that, isn't it? Boredom, wealth, stupidity. More power. You know, this might be as bright as it gets. And perhaps, gradually or not so gradually, all the lights will start to go out. And we'll look back and think how profligate we've been. Is your giant oil field going to keep all these lights going?
Might do. For a few decades.
A growing number of developing countries, India and China first and foremost, are demanding first world developed country levels of oil consumption. And that means that we're going to be in a world where major oil consumers are more and more nervous about whether or not the oil supply will grow in order to meet this very, very high and rising demand.
The tragedy is that both India and China basically deserve to have a middle class. And it's really an irony that we basically used up so much of the world's great oil supply when the oil consumers were limited to Europe, North America, and Japan.
You're not going to get into any trouble, are you?
With whom? The Alaskans are happy to take the cash. The only people who care about us drilling live thousands of miles away.
And they think you're strangling the planet with your bare hands.
They still drive cars and have central heating.
Yes, but they don't make their money destroying America's last wilderness.
Somebody has got to keep the lights on. And somebody has got to visit my parents.
At least that's not me.
K-News, Radio AM 970 Business Latest. Airfares up, Dow Jones down. Travelers are in for a rough ride as 2 more budget airlines go bust today.
What will happen to America's sense of national identity when it becomes very expensive to go from one part of the country to another? What will happen to families like mine that are spread across the country, that depend on access to very cheap, very plentiful transportation to maintain connections?
I made you some brownies.
Hi, Mom.
There's enough to feed the neighborhood.
Oh.
The last wilderness in America. And this is the first well to be drilled there, and it's my well. I mean, the field looks huge. There might be 4 billion barrels of oil in there.
You hungry?
I had breakfast on the plane. That's 1 million barrels of oil a day for the next 15 years. America might start to meet its own energy needs.
See what you think of this.
165 gallons of diesel fuel.
Where from? Does Mom know?
She thinks I paid for it.
Well, what if you get caught?
Nobody tells me when or how far to drive my car.
It's not personal, Dad. There's a fuel crisis.
Look, if I want to sit in my chair like always instead of waiting in line for gas, or if I want to pick up my daughter at the airport, like always, I'll do it. Now, what's wrong with that?
What John does here is very much in keeping with how people usually respond to these sorts of crises. John's been brought up in 40 years of kind of an individualistic consumer society where people are used to being able to fix things themselves rather than having to rely on the community to help them out.
The search for oil is much, much more difficult than most people think it is. Even with all of our computers and seismic surveys and geophysics and whatnot, all that we know is there a reservoir there? But until you actually go out with a rig and drill, just like we did in Texas in the 19th century, we don't know if there's actually oil in that reservoir.
Welcome to Alaska.
There's a great deal of gambling on spending millions and tens of millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to find out what's actually in your reservoir. Prospecting is a very, very difficult process and a very risky process, and one where the bulk of opportunities, even with modern technology, are not what you think they are to begin with.
The logs so far have been excellent.
We're ahead of schedule.
Shame there have been no oil shows yet.
Yeah, you bet.
Did you bring me some chocolate?
You remember Paul, our geosteerer?
No chocolate. But you can have this.
I prefer them in pairs.
You arrived then? You'll be pleased to hear we're sharing a bed.
I'm delighted, as long as we're not both in it at the same time.
A shortage of oil gets created when demand exceeds supply, and therefore you use up the last remaining inventory on the shelf. And the shortage creates hoarding, which creates more shortage. It's a very vicious spiral.
I want you to be doing this so we hit the reservoir here.
We'll hit it.
We won't be in my tolerance zone.
The drill will turn of its own accord.
I think we're gonna hit a fault zone and miss the target.
It's fine.
And end up sidetracking.
If you really think that, let's call a meeting.
When?
We don't need a meeting.
Later this afternoon.
Then stop the drilling, because we'll be so far off course, it'll be impossible to correct the angle.
All right. Let's have the meeting now.
So now all that's left is oil that's very politically difficult to get to, oil that's very, very expensive to produce. And that's a massive challenge for the energy industry, and more broadly, it's a massive challenge for consuming country governments who need to provide this oil to their populations to maintain the economic growth that is the basis of their legitimacy.
We're going to miss it.
Because you've given me a 50-meter sweet spot to hit a reservoir the size of Lake Titicaca.
I've mapped the area. It's very complex.
It doesn't have to be complex.
It doesn't have to be successful.
It's not like getting laid. If this reservoir's as big as you say, I can stick it anywhere.
If that's your attitude, you can stick it straight.
This is not helping.
This well is my responsibility.
Can we step back, please?
If we hit a fault zone, we'll have an ambiguous result.
I've been doing this for 25 years.
This well is costing us $36 million.
Which is why I want to hit the target.
I steer the drill bit.
We need to correct the angle.
That's my job.
How far out are we, Jess?
Don't want to miss a big field because any old hole will do you.
Okay.
We should be here.
Then let's work out the correction.
The oil isn't going to run out in the sense that one day we wake up and there's no more oil. But as the economy grows, as demand for oil grows, particularly as the economies in the developing world grow, we need more and more oil. So the oil doesn't run out. What happens is the oil market can't grow.
As the price of oil goes up under an oil shock, effectively the price would go through $100 a barrel. The people in suburbs, especially in American cities such as those of Minneapolis, would find that there is a drastic change to everyday life. Just going and collecting your shopping, for example, would be a costly activity.
Let me get your bag from the trunk, Denise.
Hey, we drove them to the supermarket last week. They should drive us this week. When do we get to burn some of their fuel?
The vast majority of American communities could never work without cars. This whole system will have to be reorganized in order to live in a world without readily available oil.
And remember, save today with K-News AM 970, the only station to bring you Gas Watch. Updates every 15 minutes on those all-important gas prices and lines.
Denise and Mike are at the cigarette counter.
Weather update. High today, 36. Overnight lows, 24. Tomorrow, bright and sunny, but rain's on the way.
Denise has asked if I'd like to go to the craft circle with her on Friday night.
Who's driving?
I said I'd drive.
They haven't used their car for the last week and a half. I mean, Denise is only asking you out so that you can take her. This is supposed to be a car share.
John!
We are not a taxi service for the Gasser family.
I imagine that what we'll see is in big cities where there's going to be a lot of pressure, parts of social fabric will actually fall apart quite fast.
in an oil shock, our lives will change. I think at the minute we currently worry about debt and credit cards and mortgages. However, this is another level of debt, effectively, that we'll all have to deal with. Whenever your take-home wage gets severely cut because of the cost of energy and the cost of fuel, what you've seen, certainly in the past, is that theft rates rise dramatically. There have been many instances, even in 2005, of gasoline theft in the US doubling, even during that slight increase in oil prices.
Governments facing this oil shock will be faced with the same difficult decisions they were in the past. Is the oil shock sufficiently serious to warrant emergency measures?
Hello?
Nick?
Yeah, I'm just getting some petrol.
Were you asleep?
No. I wasn't asleep.
Can you hear me?
What? Jess?
Listen. I'm pregnant.
Jess, I can't hear you.
Pregnant. Me. I am.
Shouldn't be out here.
I'm coming back in.
Frightened of wolves, are you?
Only when they show their teeth.
As oil-producing countries struggle to meet global demand, Venezuela has threatened to quit OPEC and go it alone. President Chavez said on national television today it's payback time for the Yankees.
So if Venezuela stopped exporting oil, that would cause an immediate shock in the rest of the world.
You don't have to have anything more than that going on, but at the same time we then find that Russian oil's back in decline. But the way history seems to work is Murphy's laws of life and well. When one bad thing happens, it usually triggers another.
The end of the age of oil is already a messy affair. We're in maybe the second to last act of the oil play, and it's getting more and more unpleasant.
Cup of coffee?
Sounds good. haven't moved.
Price has.
In Britain, you'll see on the one hand the same general impacts we've seen everywhere. Economic growth will slow, people will lose their jobs, people won't be able to afford their energy, but there'll be a real difficult decisions to be made, in particular, whether and to what degree to subsidize energy for the fuel poor.
Nick!
Rachel, I thought you cleaned yesterday.
I did. I thought you'd be at work.
Yeah, I should be.
Is this your house?
My flat, yes.
I can't afford the heating. Not with food as well. Danielle's off school with her asthma. I don't know what to do.
Shall I make a cup of tea?
We've got used to a world of centrally heated houses where if we're a little bit cold we just turn the thermostat up. The end of cheap oil means we kind of go back to that world where actually some people get very cold if they can't afford heat. But even people who are better off actually live in a world where they're actually wearing warm clothes indoors.
Well, the car's full of gas.
You stupid man.
As the price of goods got more and more expensive, people would just find it extremely hard to live their lives the way they had been doing it. Certainly, for a number of years, life would not be very nice.
Why is the drilling stopped?
I don't know. Shouldn't have.
What's happening?
Looks like we've lost some of the drill teeth down the hole. We'll have to pull the drill bit up and send the junk bucket down.
How long is this going to take, Paul?
2 days, 3.
Oh, terrific.
If we hadn't changed the angle, it wouldn't have happened.
If you hadn't changed the angle, we would have drilled a very expensive, dry hole.
Jess, phone call for you.
It's Nick on the phone. He's in Anchorage.
I'll take it back.
I'm fine.
Thanks. The last time you were here, you were nearly killed by wolves.
I'm more likely to be savaged by one of the drillers.
I want to look after you.
I don't need looking after.
And the baby!
So stop shouting.
My child as well.
The stress you're putting on me will go straight to the baby. It'll associate you with shouting and stress.
I want you to come home.
You want me padding barefoot round the flat for 9 months? Remember, you've just invited a family of 5 to live in it.
Just for a few days.
So what are you gonna do?
kick Rachel's kids out into the street. I signed a contract.
Resign.
Normal women don't give up work because they're 5 weeks pregnant.
Normal women don't have to call a chopper when they want a bar of chocolate.
Chocolate's not good for the baby.
You're acting like this is nothing.
Not nothing.
We've wanted this to happen for so long.
I know.
I thought he was gonna break us.
It's just... It's normal.
Our whole world will change for a certain period of time until we find a solution to the problem. We would need to adapt, and over time we will adapt.
They were out of aspirin.
You better try not to give me any more headaches then.
If we can't use oil for transportation, and we have no available alternative, then either people will be stranded on the outskirts of these massive middle American cities like Minneapolis, or these cities will have to be made much more compact. Living will have to go from being horizontal and spread out to being vertical, in which you have communities that can be navigated on foot. This whole system will have to be reorganized in order to live in a world without readily available oil.
Leaving the driveway.
I'm not leaving a shopping cart in the driveway. Will look like white trash.
Is John in?
He's in the kitchen, Fraser. Did he say anything about redundancy?
Fraser hadn't got any money.
We can spend more time together.
He used to say, if I quit working, you'd leave before I start driving me crazy hanging around the house.
I was joking, John. It was a joke.
When John's faced with this crisis that he can't really manage, he's going to respond by going back to the sorts of behaviours that he's been comfortable with. And when he finds that doesn't work, he's going to feel quite desolate.
As 2016 reaches its climax, $160 a barrel will force us to really rethink our lives. We won't be able to make casual trips and unnecessary trips. We'll have to start planning our day around our fuel consumption and trying to drive as little as possible. People will have to start buying new cars and realizing that when they go to buy new cars because they can't afford to operate their old SUVs, they won't be able to sell their old SUVs. Good for automakers in Detroit and in Germany, Japan, not good for anybody else.
Want to stop and get a coffee? John?
No.
K-News AM 970 gas update. We are getting calls with news that all the downtown gas stations are now dry. Will be until next Monday at the earliest. There is a long line in Medicine Lake, but if you're lucky, there is still fuel to be found at some of the out-of-town gas stations on 35 West and East, and if you're quick, on I-10 up at Lino Lakes.
Too far.
We got Nancy on the line. Nancy, where are you?
I'm in Columbia Heights in my car at the Pro Stop.
And are you having a gas there, Nancy?
I'm having a gas, Pete. I just drove right in here and I'm pulling away with a full tank.
No line at the Pro Stop on Cleveland and 37th Avenue. Nancy, that is a top tip. Your name is in our big prize draw on Friday's drive time for that free tank of gas. And if you're the lucky winner, well, as Spencer Davis said, you'll certainly be able to keep on running. Keep on running.
Thank you, Nancy.
One fine day, I'm gonna be
Jess? Jess? The gamma ray's getting hot. I think we're getting there.
How thick is it?
We've drilled down about 18 meters.
Tell them to stop. We should take a core.
Petrol has now reached £2.35 a litre.
Panic buying continues to force up gas prices across the state. With oil now costing $160 a barrel, motorists are paying twice as much to fill up as they were just 6 months ago.
We will have had to rapidly change the way we actually move people and goods. If we don't coordinate that, we'll have fistfights all the time of one neighbor actually getting in line before the next neighbor and one city getting in line before the next city. The cities that are closest to the oil supply will take it first. We'll have war. Every bad war we've had the last century has been fought over energy.
What keeps me away at night is a much higher price of oil. You cannot live with a price way above $100. You cannot at all. And that's enough. And it's not only you. I think China will collapse. India will be in a disaster. The same thing with Japan. The whole world economy. Europe, America, everywhere.
It's all shale. We're not in the reservoir yet.
As a result of burning all this oil, we're slowly poisoning ourselves. And that means that at some point the oil age is going to have to come to an end and be replaced by some other sort of age. And there's a big question about what that could be.
This is where we are. And the reservoir is just about where you're standing.
We don't know that, Jess.
I want to cut another core.
The drill plant budget's for 4 cores. You've already had 2. Both full of shale. Why don't we drill ahead for a while?
Your choice.
What if we're not close enough to the reservoir?
We're this close.
What if you called too early?
I haven't.
We could be coring for days. I can't take responsibility for you coring until you find sand. Not at $200,000 a day. You need to speak to operations in the UK to see what they think.
is it?
Apparently I have to call Chris in operations if I want to take another core.
Well, what about the second one?
It's all shale.
And Kim wants to drill on.
We're meters away.
Also tell him you've spoken to Chris.
And Chris said?
Well, Chris said take another core. And don't slam the door.
John, let's leave it.
I got your key. Give me the keys, man. You move out of line or I'll move the goddamn car for you.
I can smell it.
It's oil.
It's oil.
It's full of oil.
Fresh oil. The best smell in the world. Shall I call operations and ask if I can cut a fourth? Somebody help me! Look at the staining.
There's oil in the top 20 feet.
The rest is water. We've gone through the oil leg into the water leg.
How much do you think we got?
Not the 200 meters of oil-bearing sand we wanted, more like 15 meters.
Maximum. Hardly worth getting it out.
Might be. With oil at $160 a barrel.
Oh! So much for the giant oil field then.
The last great hope.
When you look at the success rates for these wildcat wells, it's probably only around 25%. You don't actually know if the oil's in the ground when you start to drill your well. So when it comes down to maybe the last great hopes up in Alaska and up in Anwar, not hitting them is a major disaster for the US, as many hopes, certainly politically, may have been pinned on them.
Broken his collarbone. He can hardly move. He can't swallow properly. He can't go to the toilet by himself. I'm changing his dressings every day. He's so full of pills, he'd rattle if you shook him. Which I'd like to. He's had some bleeding in his eye. They don't know if he's gonna get his sight back.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what's gonna happen.
The moment of the end of the oil age, whenever it comes, if we don't plan for it, will be bleak and brutal. But when you get to the other side of it, it's possible that the world that comes out of a world in which we're less addicted to oil is a world in which people will actually quite like living.
It's okay. It's gonna be okay.
One thing that I take away from this drama is that it's very important for us to think today about what we can do to move away from the oil age, to build a more environmentally sustainable and a more secure economy that relies on fuels, a broader mix of fuels, that don't bring with them all the political, environmental problems that oil does. And hopefully, we'll develop a policy to move away from oil today, rather than waiting until a story like this in 2016 forces us to give up oil.
The climate chaos season continues tomorrow here on BBC Two as top artists experience the spectacle.